Hello, lovely soul family. Welcome back to Undefined Life. It's Tash here, coming at you with a little bit of a life update because I'm moving through a lot of profound and significant changes at the moment, and I want to keep it real. I want this channel to be an authentic outpouring and sharing of my experience. And that's important to me because although we are all experiencing life from our own unique vantage points, we are all connected to the web of consciousness beyond the form. We are all part of the same unified field of experience, but we're experiencing that experience from seemingly different vantage points. And so what has been arising for me at a personal level, I know is not just exclusive to me, which is why I think it's helpful for us as individuals to kind of be open and vulnerable and share in a way that feels safe for us, because it can often help to act as a mirror for someone else who's going through something similar, and it can feel validating. I know that that's certainly been the case for me. When I've seen other creators sharing their experiences, it kind of, in many ways, it can kind of reflect back and say, yeah, I'm feeling that too. And the reason we often all go through these kind of shared experiences is because we're all moving through a collective awakening and ascension. And there is no, even if we're not consciously aware of it, there's no getting away from that awakening and ascension process. We can't compartmentalize our experience away from the whole, because we're part of the whole, you know. So in many ways, what we experience at the micro level is a microcosm of the macro. So I'm filming this 1 week after the peak of my Saturn return, which, if you're not familiar, the Saturn return experience happens when we're 29 and 58, because Saturn takes 29 years to orbit the Earth. And in astrology, your Saturn return is this kind of infamous period of your life, around a year, just sort of plus or minus a year, where you will experience quite significant shifts if you're not in alignment. And if you're in alignment, your experience will be refined so that you're even more streamlined in your dharmic path. And for me, my Saturn return has brought pretty much a complete dissolution of my reality as I knew it, which has then brought on a dark night of the soul. I'm laughing now, but I haven't been laughing recently. And although that's been very painful, I'm getting a sense of where it's leading me. And so, although I am somewhat feeling my way through this kind of dissolution of my experience in the dark, there's this sense in me that it's leading towards another level of expansion and freedom within my being that I'm yet to come into contact with in this life. So I know that this Saturn return, the dark night of the soul that I'm experiencing, is kind of leading me to another level of embodiment and experience that's going to be more aligned. But it's still painful getting there. So I thought I would just touch on these two aspects, the Saturn return and the dark night of the soul, because I know that people are moving through their own personal challenges. I'm seeing so many people in my world, and you know, within the communities that I access, in some form saying that they're moving through really profound, deep changes in their life, and they're struggling with that. And that is partly because we are in the middle of this ascension process. Humanity is shifting consciousness now at a rate which is unprecedented. We're moving through so much shadow and density, and it's causing huge shifts, which is what it's designed to do. So we're going to see those shifts in the collective. I can't see any area going untouched, and that's also going to be reflected in our own individual experiences. And that kind of leads me on to the Saturn return, which is a really interesting kind of talking point in astrology. And it wasn't actually something I was consciously aware I was experiencing until a friend pointed out to me, kind of in the middle of all the upheaval and change that I've been going through, like, hey, aren't you 29? Aren't you going through your Saturn return right now? And I was like, is that why? Is that why this is all so fucking difficult? And I mean, I'm not outsourcing this experience and blaming it on the Saturn return, but I find it really interesting and fascinating that all of the changes I've been going through have aligned energetically with the Saturn return experience. So if you're not familiar with it, Saturn in astrology is it's like the masculine energy of the solar system. It's like, not in a kinky way, but it's big daddy energy, right? It's like, sit down, we need to talk. You know, you've had 29 years in this incarnation. What have you done with it? And where are you going? Are you in alignment? And if not, why not? So it's very much a kind of practical, no fluff sit down with your dad. Like, I didn't have many of those experiences growing up, but you see them in the media and in, you know, TV and films. It's like, what are you doing? And it's not the conversation you'd have with your mum. It's like the practical, the bones of your experience, and it's foundational stuff. It's like, what routines and habits and structures do you have in your life? And if you don't have them, why not? And, you know, those real foundational elements of like, what's your life built on? Are those aspects that your life is built on, are they in alignment with what you're here to do as a soul, to learn, to grow, to expand, to heal? Is the experience you're having in alignment with that trajectory? And if not, this is the time that usually you'll be nudged to make changes so that you are in alignment. So my understanding generally is that if you experience your Saturn return and you're in alignment and you are living your dharmic path, your soul purpose and mission, your experience will just be refined a little bit and streamlined. If you're not living your dharmic path and you're not in alignment with or if you're not following the trajectory of your like highest embodiment and potential, Saturn comes along, you know, in you energetically in your experience and provides you with the conditions for like a great reset, really, the great reset of your experience. That's kind of what I've been calling these last couple of months. It's like the great reset of my life, because essentially, you know, you only get a visit from Saturn every 29 years. So it's kind of like, what have you done for the last 29 years? And what are you going to be doing for the next 29 years? You know, it's a long time to be building your life. So it's almost, I think that's why so many people, when they get to like on the brink of 30, they have a wobble. I've got a lot of friends and family around me that have turned 30 recently. And it's interesting to observe how many people kind of get to the 30 number and there's this like, holy shit. And they're questioning, it's like an existential crisis. They're questioning their path, their life, their partner, their job, you know, what have I done? Who am I? You know, and it's like, I think the part of the reason for that is because we've got the presence of Saturn in our experience, where we are really beginning to, look at and observe those foundational aspects of our reality and really just checking, are we good? You know, are we in alignment with our highest potential or not? And if not, course correction. So I've had one fucking hell of a course correction over the last couple of months. And that has kind of manifested as a lot of changes in a relatively short space of time. And this kind of leads me on to the other point that I want to make about kind of what's required of us as we move through this awakening and ascension process. And that's the fluidity, to be in alignment with this ever-shifting experience that we're going through as a collective, where the vibrational frequency of the planet and of humanity is shifting now at such a rate where we're going to need to be adaptable, we're going to need to be flexible, and we're going to need to embody the fluidity and flow of the feminine, which is the consciousness that's arising on the planet to temper the patriarchal programming that's been predominant for thousands of years. The feminine is rising, and her nature is flow, is fluidity. It's the medicine for the rigid way of being that we've adopted as a collective. And that's been something that's been really, really clear for me, that if you're on the spiritual path and you're doing your inner work regularly and you're checking in and you're choosing to meet your emotions consciously and to move through them and to understand your unconscious patterns and programming and conditioning, if you're on that path and developing self-awareness, then naturally your vibrational frequency is going to be shifting. And that's kind of what's been happening for me. Last year in May, I kind of manifested a set of circumstances, which at the time was exactly what I needed. I moved through a lot of issues around my relationship with my dad, anger and abandonment. I processed a lot of that. And then within a week of doing this really major clearing that I'd done, I got 2 jobs. I secured the flat that I really wanted, and I came into union in my twin flame relationship. So these circumstances just shifted the minute I went through a big emotional release. And I cleared out some of the karmic baggage between me and my dad. And our relationship has shifted really significantly since then. So just evidence that this inner work is powerful shit. And my reality kind of readjusted according to all of that work. And at the time, it was very resonant. But what happened was, as I continued to do my inner work in this space, I had a flat of my own. I was feeling really kind of like empowered. I was doing the independent woman thing. I was living on my own, supporting myself financially. But as I was doing my inner work, within maybe 3 or 4 months, that experience started to feel misaligned. And all of a sudden, as I was moving through kind of more healing, I could feel my soul craving a level of freedom that I couldn't find in those experiences. I was finding that being at a desk job, especially one that deep down didn't light me up, it was very functional and it was for a good cause, it's for a mental health charity, it didn't satisfy me at the level that my soul's been craving. And that became really, really apparent. And I found myself in this weird kind of almost caged animal-like experience where I was just pacing in my living room, backwards and forwards with my computer open, my desk like screaming at me like, hey, you've got some work to do. And I was like, I can't bring myself to do it. This just doesn't feel like there's flow there anymore. And as someone that's really highly sensitive to energy and works with energy a lot, I'm really attuned to when energy is flowing and when it's not. And I mean, it's a gift, but it sometimes feels like a curse because I can't override that. I can no longer move into states of denial or avoidance of that. If it's not right energetically, I feel it to the point where it's like a black cloud hovering over me until I do something about it. So my work felt misaligned. My twin union felt misaligned because the conditions around it were steeped in fear. The individual that I was in the dynamic with was also not moving through their inner work. So there was this misalignment. And so that became really apparent quite quickly. And even where I've been based geographically in Milton Keynes has felt like a misalignment. And it being in those circumstances was right for those couple of months last year. And I think partly because I was supposed to be in that experience to have it as a contrast for me to realise that that's not what I want. I am craving in this life, I can feel it, I'm craving a depth of experience. I'm craving a level of freedom that I cannot simply settle in any aspect of my experience. And what I mean is I can't, if it doesn't feel juicy and deep and like it's really coming from the heart, and if it's really not like the depths of what's possible, I'm not interested in it. And this is showing up in all aspects of my life. It's like sex. If it's not sacred, and if it's not honored, and if it's not, there's not like an acknowledgement of the divinity of it and like presence and deep union, I'm not interested. If my work is not feeding me, if it's not satisfying me at that level, I'm not interested. I'd rather live in a tent in the middle of nowhere hunting squirrels, which is what I may be doing in the next couple of months, who knows, because I'm no longer willing to confine myself to an existence that feels limiting or stifling. And it's strange because it's like consciously it doesn't make any sense, but this is what my soul has been asking me for. So I dissolved a lot of my experiences last year. And everything kind of came to a head in my Saturn return last week. The flat completed and I moved out. My handover at work completed and I left my job. I also got COVID and I came on my moon cycle. So it felt like a real kind of climax. And it was interesting because a friend pointed out to me, like, isn't it funny that, you kind of basically went through this massive clearing and ending, and then you went through like a really profound kind of illness where you got really ill for a while. I mean, it felt like flu. I don't even know if it's COVID. I take the PCR test with a pinch of salt. I got ill and it was like, it was like just during this big clear out of my physical reality, my body goes through this massive clearing too. It's just insane. And that was right at the peak of my Saturn return. So change has been kind of brewing in my experience for a while, and now it's all come to a head, and I find myself in my parents' room, the spare room, and this is very much a temporary measure, and I find myself kind of faced with a lot of possibility, no real bondage. I don't have any debts. I have a little bit of money behind me. I don't have any ties or responsibilities. And in some ways, I feel like that's kind of perfect for the world that we're moving into, which is going to require more adaptability, flexibility, fluidity from us, because we're living in ever increasingly, uncertain circumstances. This idea of our physical reality being a source of stability for us is gonna dissolve. Like, we can't rely on the external to be solid. We need to be solid in here with our connection to who we truly are, beyond our egoic ideas and attachments and constructs, and that's what I feel like I'm moving through right now. It's almost the universe clearing out my reality, which has inspired another dark night of the soul. It's like, I don't know how or where to orientate myself. I don't, it's like, I describe the dark night of the soul kind of as like being a ship that's in port when you're anchored in one reality or one idea of who you are. When you go through your dark night of the soul, it's almost like your anchoring to the port has been severed and you're starting to float out into the ocean, and you're in the middle of the ocean in the dark. You've got no way of navigating. You don't know where dry land is. You don't know which direction you're due to be going in, and it feels like this kind of chasm of an existential chasm. It's like you're not one thing anymore, but you haven't become the other thing either. It's really that process of metamorphosis, and it's really painful and uncomfortable. I've been through this before, but it's a necessary stage because it forces us to dig really, really deep and to really examine the choices we're making and the places where egoically we've got stuck and attached and rigid, and actually maybe shut out an aspect of our consciousness that wants to emerge. And so it's like, okay, you need to kind of lose the sense of who you are so who you really are can emerge. So it's a gift, but it doesn't always feel like it when you're in the middle of it. And this kind of leads me on to, I think, the process that we're moving through collectively at the moment, which, as I've mentioned, is this kind of re-emergence of the feminine in the collective consciousness. And the reason this feels so prominent is because I'm realizing that as my reality has been excavated and my sense of identity has been uprooted and I'm left kind of in this dark void-like space, it's leaving me kind of suspended in, like, the only home base I have is what's really going on within me. Like, that's all I have to orientate myself. Like, okay, well, what's going on within me right now that needs addressing and needs my acknowledgement? And I'm realizing that there is a wildness that wants to emerge in me, which I think I was beginning to sense last year with the pacing in my living room and this sense of feeling confined and trapped and wanting more connection with raw, wild nature, which I just haven't been getting in Milton Keynes, and feeling feeling, the words that keep coming to my head are like the domestication of the soul. It's like this sense of domestication where it's almost like, you know, when you look at like wild animals that have been domesticated, like big old dogs on a lead, it's like almost going against their innate nature, which is to be these kind of like full expression beings. But we found a way to, I don't want to say diminish them, but we found a way to train them so that they fit into our conditioned idea of what's acceptable, right? And it's like, I feel like that process has happened. I've allowed that process to happen to me, or I've in fact imposed that on myself, this domestication of who I am. Like I found myself just shrinking to fit in a box that I've created and that has been kind of placed there by society. And so this dark night of the soul is emerging, I can feel, because it's time to dissolve that box and realize that the box only exists when I believe that it does, and that I'm here to re-emerge from this void like state that I'm currently in the full expression of who I am, unapologetically. And I think that this is an experience that's shared by many. And it really is a part of the reclamation of the divine feminine that's occurring on the planet right now. And what that looks like is a reclamation of our wildness. So one of the big things that I'm seeing emerging for me and lots of other people is this bubbling rage and anger that wants to be expressed. If you kind of think back to what I've been saying about the domestication of the soul, if you think about the kind of states of expression or feelings that aren't really acceptable or accepted in society, anger is a big one. And I was talking to my sister about this the other day. So many people are moving through their experience in denial of their anger. And from the point of the divine feminine, collectively, we have been harboring deep levels of rage, anger, a sense of betrayal. It's a real like kind of sacred rage, you know. It's not just like a bit of road rage. It's like, it's old, it's ancient, it's generational, it's collective. It's this sense within us that we've been wronged, demeaned, diminished, subjugated, persecuted, killed for being embodiments of the feminine throughout history. And it's like enough is enough. I can feel at a collective level, and certainly within myself and within the experiences of the people around me, there is this like boiling up of like, no, enough is enough. And that kind of real Kali, like the dark goddess rising energy is coming up, where people are beginning to be reminded of the rage that sits within them that has never had an outlet of expression. And I feel that in myself. And I've been feeling like a really kind of sense of depression recently, particularly moving through this dark night of the soul. And I'm realizing that anger and rage is the thread that leads us back to feeling like the totality of who we are. Because depression really is suppression. So when we're in states of depression, what's actually happening is it's like trying to contain something. Depression is like a numbing almost of our experience, right? And it's like, well, what is it that we're numbing? There's obviously some stuff in there that we don't feel safe to feel. So it's easier to just not feel any of it and move through this life in a kind of ambivalent state. And what's needed actually, I think, for many people to reconnect with the totality of who they are and their inner power is to reclaim their anger and their rage. And that's what I'm moving through at the moment, this sense that I don't know what I'm doing as I move forwards now. Like I'm doing a couple of house sits for a few months. I don't have a permanent place to live. I don't know where I'm going to be beyond April. But what I do know is that I need a lot of time in nature, and I need a lot of time to allow myself to express what I've been kind of unconsciously for most of my life repressing, which is that I feel this ancient anger and rage in me of like every single time a man has acted in a way that doesn't feel safe for me or has made me feel unsafe, every single time that as a woman I've been objectified and I've been I've allowed myself to either be diminished or feel diminished in someone's presence. It's like there is this part of me that wants to take up a lot of space, and part of that is in vocalizing my rage and anger. And I see this in many people, and I will continue to document this process of reclaiming our rage and wildness, because I think it's an essential part of our healing. It's just not very comfortable because we don't know what to do with anger. And I'm feeling that at some point I will probably birth some kind of embodiment workshop working with rage and anger, because I really do feel it's the thread to bring us back to ourselves, the totality of who we are. It's the integration work, it's the shadow work. It's coming back into contact with like the totality of our humanness, the animal self, the human self, the angelic self. You know, we're not just these transcendental beings. We are humans that feel and want to express. And we've been fucking living in these kind of like pacified, domesticated, comfortable, convenient states for so long that we've forgotten our wildness. And that's what wants to be reclaimed now. It's the feminine. You know, the predominant state on the planet has been the patriarchy, the patriarchal programming of the wounded masculine, which is pushing, grinding, you know, slogging through, keep going. It's rigid. It's devoid of pleasure. It's devoid of play. It's devoid of spontaneity. It's devoid of creativity. It's rigid to the point where the soul has been stamped out. And the feminine is what will temper that on the planet and what is going to bring back balance. And that's not just women, that is every single being on the planet beginning to acknowledge and embody their femininity, that feminine energy within them. And that is not like a certain expression necessarily. It doesn't need to take any one form. It's play, it's flow, it's creativity, it's receptivity, it's softness, it's allowing, it's our emotionality. So it's all of the aspects of our consciousness that are generally in modern society deemed either wrong as adults or childlike or uncomfortable to deal with, and we don't, we kind of shove it to one side. It's like, no, we're here to feel it all. And reclaiming the feminine is going to be a huge part of how we heal as a collective, and how we heal our connection to the earth too, which is innately feminine and wild and untamed and unbridled. So, yeah, I feel as though we've got a lot of change to come, and a really big part of that change is rewilding. For me, at an individual level anyway, but I'm sensing that collectively that is what's needed. It's a reintegration of our imperfect parts, the parts that we have not made space for in our reality because we feel like they're too shameful, we don't know what to do with them, so we just kind of shove them to one side. It's like we need to reclaim these parts of ourselves now. That's how we heal. So yeah, that's kind of my update and what I'm sensing into that is going to continue to kind of play out in the collective. And I feel, although I've got a lot of anticipation about the unknowns that are looming, I also feel excited that the freedom that I've been seeking is not really like in any one set of circumstances in my reality. It's within myself. And that freedom is just expressing without holding anything back. Like, not in a rude way, not to be imposing on other people, but just to allow what wants to emerge. Instead of living in this confined, limited way. And a lot of that for me personally is going to come through my sexuality. I've got a real draw to tantra. And I know that that's a huge part, as well as anger, that's a huge part of how we suppress and repress. We don't know what to do with the many aspects of our sexuality. And we have a very, very limited view in the West of what sex means. So we kind of box it in, right? And then if we don't have an outlet for that, it emerges in sometimes unhealthy ways, which is something I've experienced recently as well, being on the receiving end of someone's shadow who has not integrated or worked with repressed parts of their sexuality. It then comes out in ways that is not always healthy. So we really have a lot of reclaiming to do as a society, and I'm certainly in the process now of moving through the kind of the dissolving of the old and rebirthing from a place of like integration of all parts. It's exciting because I think it's gonna create an experience that I've been longing for, which is like depth of and feeling all of it and expressing all of it without shame, without apology. That to me is true freedom. And that's what my soul strives for. And I think that that's why my reality has been dissolving, because those circumstances were not conducive to that way of being. And so, yeah, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm kind of moving through, a kind of a period of unknown. I'm looking to buy a van. I'm probably going to spend a lot of time on the road this year, just being in contact with nature and reacquainting myself with my wildness. And I look forward to sharing that process with you. So if any of this has resonated with you, your Saturn return, your dark night of the soul, your process of rewilding, please share in the comments below. I'd love to hear. I'm going to be making a lot more content around this, and also the twin flame connection. As someone that's really moved through the depths of that, I want to play a part in rectifying any kind of delusions around the twin flame connection, and really kind of help educate and inform on what it's about and why we have these unique twin flame experiences. So I'm excited to be sharing more. Thank you so much for watching this if you stuck to the end, and I look forward to connecting with you again really soon.